What's going on, Sumolings? Thank you for joining us for another product walkthrough webinar. I am Lindsay, and I am joined by the team over at bCast. bCast is a podcast hosting, distribution, and analytics platform designed to transform listeners into leads. It is available on AppSumo right now, starting at just $79 for a lifetime deal. But before we dive in, first, I want to tell you just a few quick things. The first is if you want to tell us a little bit about your use case, your podcast perhaps, you could do that over in the chat room. The second thing is if you have any questions, whether that's about the deal, the tool, how to get set up, anything like that, leave those questions in the Q&A box down below the video. And we are going to circle back to all of those questions at the end of the walkthrough. The third thing is that there will be a replay of this available, so you can watch this as many times as you would like. All right, that's it for me. Hello, Tom. How are you doing today?
I'm really good. Thanks for the intro, Lindsay.
Absolutely. We are excited to have you. I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to you for the walkthrough. Let me know when you're ready for some questions. Sumolings, leave those questions down below. And I'll see you soon.
For sure. I will share my screen. Thank you for all the questions. Yeah, just ping them in the box and then we'll get to them later, won't we, Lindsay? So yes. I'm actually going to start off before we jump right into the walkthrough. I need to kind of explain the background to bCast, why it's here, why it actually exists. And it all started because of this business you can see on the screen. I was working for this, they're a B2B SaaS company. I was working for them as head of marketing. And we started this podcast that you can see here. It's called Sales Ops Demystified. We started this podcast because we wanted to learn more about the person we're trying to sell to, but also sell to this person. And you can see we started off with these guests. The interviews weren't that great because I wasn't very good at podcasting. But you can see now we've done about 110 episodes. And the reason why we've done 110 is because the podcast is working really well. It's working really well, mainly because of this guest here. This guest came onto the podcast, did a great interview. We talked about sales operations. We learned about sales operations. And then he actually went through the sales process and bought some software from the company. And so what essentially happened was that we got a big return on all the time and money we spent on the podcast from that relationship with the guest. And so this got me and my co-founder Neil thinking about how people can make podcasts profitable, and how businesses and freelancers and agencies can use podcasts to learn about their customers, to add value to their customers, but then also become profitable. And so that's the aim of bCast, is to help you start and grow a podcast, but then also to make it profitable. So everything I'm going to show you in the application is all around how can you start the podcast, grow the podcast, and actually make money from the podcast. And so if anybody is asking in the questions, how are you different from Libsyn, from Transistor, from all the other podcast hosts, it's because of that reason. It's because me and Neil, the founders, are marketers. We podcast to make a profit. And so everything we do with the tool is focused around that. So that's the core difference. So that's what I want you to be kind of thinking of and looking at as we go through the tool. So let's jump in. What you can see here is a single bCast account. So we just have this one single podcast. This podcast belongs to this business, just so you have some kind of context. They're a SaaS company called Document 360, and they run this podcast called Knowledge Based Ninjas. And again, the goal of this podcast is for the business to learn about this target persona, and add value to the audience, but then also, of course, make a profit. And so that's what we've been helping them do with bCast. So let's just start off with the main screen right here. So if you have multiple codes, you can have multiple podcasts. I think if you purchase 2 codes, you can have 3 podcasts, and then it scales like that. So let's jump into this first podcast. It's called Knowledge Based Ninjas. And we can see here that the main functionality that bCast does is it takes all the audio content that you've uploaded and then generates what we call an RSS feed. It's the RSS feed that we then feed into Apple, Spotify, Google, so people, when they're walking around, can listen to the podcast on their phones. So let's just have a look. Let me just show you this podcast on Apple so you can see what this actually does. So you upload all the content to this podcast, you take this feed, you insert it into Apple, and this is what you get. So you can see this is a replica of, he's basically pulling the content from bCast and serving it through Apple. At the same time, what bCast will do is take all of that content you've uploaded and produce what we call the podcast site. You can see, again, all the same content, just uploaded onto the bCast domain. Now, we'll get back to this in a second, but you can also take this whole site and then upload that onto a custom domain. So it could be, if they wanted to, this business could add podcast, let me write that correctly, .document360.io, and this site, they haven't done this, and I'll explain why in a second, this site could sit on there. Or at the same time, they could also buy the domain, probably for not very much, knowledgebaseninjas.com, and then have that podcast sit on that domain, which is actually something that we should probably do with them. We'll talk about embeddable players in a second. So let's jump into the episodes. So this is where you would create a new episode and then upload the content for this episode. So why don't we take this episode? I think it went live today, actually. So you can see the guest here is a guy called Ellis Pratt. And then we've uploaded the title, the date and time, the episode number, a short description here, the audio file here. We've added the author of the podcast. We haven't actually added any show notes yet, but this is where you would write, this is an awesome interview. And so the show notes is where you can add more complex things like bullets and also links if you wanted to. And then you also mark whether this show has explicit content or not. And then we also have this feature here, which I don't think any other podcast host has, is that guest, you can then add in their name and email so that when the episode does go live, they'll get an email with share links for the episode. A core like growth strategy, one of the ways your podcast is going to grow is by having all of your guests share the content. And so it's super important to either reach out to them manually or set up this email so the guests do, of course, get that content. Then, of course, you can add the specific image for that. Now, the other feature that we allow for in the AppSumo deal, with every code or with every podcast, you get 2 hours of transcription per month. So to transcribe the episode, once it's uploaded, you can simply click here. You can say the only 2 languages we're supporting right now, but we are adding more. So we'll say this is British, and we'll say there's 2 contributors because there's the guest and the host, and then we will click save. And so the transcription is queued. That will be emailed to the host and will also be here in a second. So we'll come back and collect that. Let's just jump in. So yeah, you'll see that the episode will be on the podcast site. We scroll right to the bottom. So you can see the episode here. But actually, a better strategy normally for you is to take that content and upload it onto your own site. So you'll also see that we have all this podcast. This host has created a blog post on their site with some key takeaways, which is great for SEO. But then also they've taken the bCast player you can see here, and they've added that episode there. Let's just quickly do a little tour of the bCast player. So this is where someone can take the episode and embed. Someone can share the URL, or they can click and share directly on social here. Someone can subscribe to get the opt-in, and we'll talk more about that in a second, right here on the player. Or someone can use this to subscribe to the RSS feed. And then you can, of course, like many podcast players, you can jump forward, you can change the speed, and you can change, or you can mute. It's probably also a good time to explain the integrated affiliate feature. So right now, and here's a big thing with the AppSumo deal, you cannot actually take the bCast branding off the player. Maybe we will do that in the future. We actually don't know yet. But if we do that for any of our clients or for any of our plans, of course, the Sumo links will get that. But in the meantime, what you can do, and this client doesn't actually have it set up, but you can add, like by going into your account and then going to your profile, you can sign up for the bCast affiliate program, which gives 40% commissions for anyone you send and a 1-year cookie policy. And so you can, once you sign up and then you add your affiliate ID in here, this will essentially turn the link on the player into your own affiliate link. And that will allow you to claim the commissions on anyone you do end up sending to bCast. That also goes for the link here on the podcast site. So that's what we're doing in the meantime. But in the future, we may be able to turn that off. We haven't confirmed that yet. So it's not a price. It's a potential. It's a maybe. Okay, so let's jump back in. So I've shown you the podcast. I've shown you the episodes. I've shown you what we can do with the episodes. Now it's actually probably a good time for me to show you the podcast settings. So this is where you would upload all the information for your podcast. So you can obviously change the title. You can edit your RSS feed. You can add a description. You add your categories. You add all this information about the podcast here. And of course, you add your image. So that's the podcast settings. This is the episodes. We'll come back to audio inserts in a second. Let me just show you more about the website. So you can either turn off or on the bCast site that you see here. And this is also where you would add your custom domain. So it could be a subdomain, or it could be just a root domain. That's where you do that. You can add your social profiles here. These will simply show on your podcast site. And you can add the directories that you exist in. So we will, in the podcasting world, there's 2 directories that you don't want any host to auto-submit to. If you auto-submit your podcast through to Spotify or Apple on a different host, that means that podcast is going through their account to those directories. So if you wanted to leave the host, or if you wanted to access the account to get some of the data, for example, you wouldn't be able to. And so this is why at bCast, we will submit you to every other directory apart from Apple or Spotify, because you don't want someone basically holding you hostage if you want to leave. And so what bCast will do is, once you're submitted to Apple, once you're live in Apple, you can go in here and you can search for your podcast. So let's just do this one now, because we actually released this feature recently. So once you found your podcast here and you click save, what that will do is it will directly insert you into the other directories. And once that's been done, we'll reach out to you on support to give you these links. But it won't do it to Apple and it won't do it to Spotify. And therefore, it's on you to submit to Apple and to submit to Spotify, because you want to own those directories. Trust me, if any host is doing that for you, it's going to be a nightmare if you choose to leave, and you also can't get in there and control the feed and get the analytics. So you do these 2, we do the rest. So that's the directories tab. And then of course we have the analytics tab. So our analytics do definitely have some improvements to be made. Right now let's take the past 6 months. So this is this podcast downloads over this time period. So we can obviously see the number of downloads during the time period. So we released that episode today, did pretty well. Now, so we can change by date. At the same time, we can also see these by episode. So you can see this is actually a bit, let me just go back. Let me do that in the past 7 days, might be easier. So you can actually see that when you have a lot of episodes getting a lot of exposure, it is quite hard to see the lovely little, maybe I'll just go to today, that might be easier. So you can also, let's go just to the 29th. Cool. So here you can see a pie chart showing you which episodes are getting, and you can see that the majority of the downloads today came from, actually that's interesting. So they came from a different episode. They didn't come from the episode that went live today. They came from a different episode. So that must mean that episode got shared somewhere on social media. It's quite interesting. And then you can just see the number of downloads per episode today. So you can see that the episode we released only got 31. This episode got 170. That's super interesting. Now, in the future, we are going to enable you to see the country that the downloads are coming from, and also the directory. So whether they're coming from Apple, whether they're coming from Spotify, and then there'll be more stuff coming after that. But right now you can filter by episode and you can filter by date. And here's all of the downloads that are coming into bCast from all of the different directories, including our own player. So that, like most of those features I've shared, are kind of common features you'll see in most podcast hosts. Maybe not the custom domain, maybe not the integrated affiliate, but the next two are the features that right now most Thumolings are getting excited about, and are the features that set us apart from all of the rest of the podcast hosts. So the first one we're going to look at is called, well, we call it dynamic content insertion or audio inserts. But to explain this, it's probably better to zoom out, right? If we think about what this company are trying to do, they're hosting this podcast where they want to build relationships with people in their market. So they make knowledge-based software. So they want to engage documentation managers and technical writers. So they're interviewing a load of these people. They're building relationships. They're also building an audience of documentation managers and technical writers. The next step they want to take their podcast listeners on in order to get them closer to doing a free trial is obviously getting the email address, right? So we want to go from download to email address. And the question is, what is the most effective way to go from download to email address? And we have found that a very effective way of doing this is obviously to offer something for free in exchange for the email address. So what this client have done is they've created something called the, the Knowledge-Based Ninjas Handbook, which summarizes insights from the last 30 or so interviews. And they give that away for free in exchange for the email address. Now, how do they advertise that? The handbook, we call it the KBN, Knowledge-Based Ninjas Handbook. They advertise that by taking this 24-second advert that the host has recorded. So they've created this ad, they uploaded it here, and once they've done that, they've gone to choose episodes. And here you'll see every episode in the backlog, apart from the one we released today. And what's happened is that these have all been selected, and then in a couple of clicks, we've been able to insert this. When this was inserted, you can see it was inserted. You can see when these were inserted, but they were inserted from that day forever. Actually, why don't we can do this right now. We can do this for today's episode. So we'll insert this ad because we only have one. And we're not going to add anything at the end. We just want to add it at the start, and we'll do it from today, and we'll leave to run continuously. So if I click build, what that will do is then insert this insert into this episode. And so now, well, actually in a couple of minutes, this ad will show at the start of this episode. So we can see 21:51 there. That's the length of the episode. Hopefully by the time we finish this, that will have increased by 24 seconds as we've added the ad to the start. But what's quite cool is that if, for example, this business had a webinar next week they wanted to advertise, and actually they wanted to advertise the webinar instead of the ebook, just for the next 5 days. All they would have to do is record a short audio ad, again, 25 seconds, upload it here, jump to choose episodes, and they would simply insert that into the front of every episode. And they get all those impressions just for those 5 days, because they could choose it here, and they would say run from today. Let's just say they want to run it into the webinar, which is on Wednesday. And so they run it just for those 5 days. And then after that, they could very easily remove it and then re-add the ebook insert. So instead of having your editor or having you going back, downloading all the files, editing them in GarageBand or whatever, and re-uploading them, you can do that in a few minutes and a few clicks. Basically, if you have a podcast, you have this backlog of attention that you should be somehow moving down your funnel. You basically, if you're not trying to get the email address from those downloads that are happening all the time, then you're really wasting your time and money on the podcast. And so that's the dynamic content insertion feature. It basically allows you to insert an ad at the start or the end of any number of episodes for any period of time. And it's super powerful. Cool. So I hope everybody understands that. Hit me up with questions in the comments if that wasn't clear, because it's quite an important feature. Next is a feature that we're calling auto opt-in. And so with bCast, you can create something called an email list. We have, as you can see here, created an email list for the handbook. And so once you've created an email list, you simply come in here, add this. You can then choose to integrate the email list. Right now, we integrate directly with an email autoresponder called Email Octopus, or you can use Zapier webhooks. Right now, we haven't integrated this yet because we're just probably being lazy, or the client's being lazy. And what the email list does is it gives you what we call a subscription address. And so our subscription address is ninja@bcast.email. And so what we're actually doing in that ad that we just talked about is, instead of the host reading out a long, boring, hard to write URL for someone to claim the ebook, they're simply saying, send a blank email to ninja@bcast.email, and that will subscribe them to the ebook. So what happens, and anyone listening now, just send a blank email to ninja@bcast.email and you'll see the process. But what will happen is this number of lead would increase. These leads can be downloaded, or ideally they're integrated and they go straight through Zapier into your email autoresponder so you can deliver the ebook. Right now, we're actually doing a manual process where we download these leads and then the client puts them, or the host puts them into their email autoresponder. And the other kind of clever thing you can do here is that if you don't want to use the bcast email address, you can create your own email address. So ninja@document360.io, for example, and then you forward emails from there to this. And so then you don't have to share the bcast brand. And so this, we found we get slight increase in conversion rate versus just giving a URL. If you think about someone on their phone, if they're listening to the podcast, all they have to do is open the email app, fire off a blank email. That's faster than having to open Safari, type in the URL, find the form, type in their email address, etc. And so we're finding about a 25% increase in conversion rate by using auto opt-in versus just saying a URL. So when you combine auto opt-in with dynamic content insertion, it's a very powerful combination to turn those downloads, to turn those listeners into leads. And this is kind of the core feature set right now behind bCast, is you're doing all this work to get the attention, to get these downloads, but there's really no point having the downloads if you're not moving those people through your sales funnel, if you're not collecting the email address, and then ideally either like having a sales call, showing, like demoing your product, or getting them into a free trial. Because right now, Document 360 have this, like let's say today, they've had 250 people download. So that they both had 250 impressions on their audio content, and they've all been directed to downloading the ebook. Once they have the email address, then Document 360 can do anything they want with the email address, right? They can pitch them on the free trial, they can try and get them on a sales call, and that's what's going to get them the ROI on the podcast. So I'm pretty sure I've now covered, one final thing. Once you have created the email list, you can then also add that email list to the player. So if you look at this, you'll see that that's the same email list that they have in auto opt-in. And then you just select the email address here for the podcast, and then that email list appears on each player. At the same time, of course, you can change the player color. You can see the player color here is that lovely purple color. And actually you can see here, this has increased by the 24 seconds. So I know you can't actually hear this, guys, but if you can, maybe I'll put this in the chat, but I'll put this in the chat so you guys can check it out on Q&A. Oh, there's no chat. How do I, is there any way? Oh yeah, here in the chat. So I just pinged the episode there. So if you go there and download, you'll hear the first 24 seconds is the host pitching to get the ebook. And so you can kind of see that in action. And you can basically see there that within like 3 clicks and 2 seconds, we were able to add that call to action on the front of the podcast. And so people listening get exposed to that advert and ideally convert to email address, then ideally convert into a free trial or into leads. And so that's the kind of core ethos. With bCast, we spent a lot of time and effort working out how we can monetize podcasts, how we can get an ROI on podcasts. Because remember, me and Neil are marketers. We're like born and bred marketers. We've been doing this for like 10 years. So everything else we do going forward is going to be focused on how can we enable the bCast customers, the Sumo links, to make a return, to make an ROI on their podcast. And so if you're not looking to make a return, if you just podcasting for a hobby, then you can still use bCast. You're probably not going to use it to its full potential. But if you are looking to somehow like make a profit, make a return, grow your business with a podcast, then bCast, in my opinion, is the best podcast host to go with. So I think I did that in 25 minutes, which I think is the perfect time. Lindsay, was that good?
That was great. And it does seem like people in the chat have been agreeing that this was great. Nice. Well done. This is great. Yeah. I think we're all
Amazing.
in agreement that you did a good job.
Great.
Yeah, Sumolings, we're ready to take your questions. We do have a bunch here in the Q&A section, but if you have submitted questions in the chat room and you really, really still want those answered, make sure you put them in the Q&A box, or else I won't see them. Yeah, we're just going to roll through them. Are your statistics IAB version 2 compliant?
Great question. The short answer is no, but it's definitely something that we want to do. The reason it's no is that we obviously had a massive list of things we wanted to build over the last almost a year now, and getting the compliance on the downloads was not higher in our list than building the features that are going to make you profitable. So I for sure agree that we need that, because we want to provide very accurate stats to our users, but it's not something we've done yet, but it will happen. I don't know when it will happen, but it will.
Cool. Can prefixes be added for tracking reasons for things like Chartable and Voxnest?
Another good question, and the answer is pretty much the same. Cool. That is valuable for sure for the users, but it hasn't been prioritized. So that again will get done, but I can't say when.
All right. If we want to run a test podcast before migrating our main podcast, how easy/difficult is it to remove the test podcast from our account and add the proper one? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because before we did the AppSumo deal, you couldn't actually delete a podcast. But then I think 3 days ago, we built the delete feature. So you can see here, you do everything to create the podcast and you can delete it with 2 clicks. So it's very easy is the answer.
All right. The next question, is it possible, this is somewhat similar, is it possible to disable the bCast site if we already host show notes, etc. on our WordPress site?
So you can do that here with that tick box.
Great.
And we actually recommend to customers that you take the player and you embed that onto your site and you add other content onto that page, because obviously you want to rank for SEO.
Sure.
But it's like the majority of customers, they have the site here or on a subdomain, and then they also host on their site. So yes, you can turn it off. We advise you host all the content on your site, but it is also useful to have the sub site as well.
All right. Thank you. Does it matter the format that the podcast should be uploaded in? MP3, WAV file?
Yeah. MP3 is the preferred. We do actually accept M4A, but it won't play on some devices. So MP3, any podcast editing software or editor that's a person would recommend to upload in MP3.
Cool. Do we retain the RSS in case we decide to transfer to Libsyn or Simplecast?
Yeah, so you wouldn't retain the RSS because it's, as you can see, it's on our domain, but you will be able to import. Pretty much every podcast host allows you to insert or select your existing podcast and import. So you wouldn't take the feed, but you could very easily suck all the content out of the feed. So just as if you were to import a podcast into bCast, you should be able to insert a podcast into any other host, and it will basically replicate the feed. Then you can just delete or you can just forget about the old one, or it will get deleted when you delete your bCast account.
Awesome. All right. We have questions for, I guess, clarifications. We got this question a couple times. So I'm just getting started with a podcast. How does this help me get set up with Apple, etc.?
So the question is, how do you get into Apple?
Yeah.
Cool. So it's a little bit confusing. Basically, what you have to do is go to this URL, iTunes Connect, and then, I mean, we're not going to be able to see my password, but then you basically log in. You need an Apple ID though, which is a bit annoying. And then you just log in, and inside Apple, you'll see these different options, but you go to Podcast Connect, and then the homepage you'll get to here is actually where you submit. So we can actually do this live, but this podcast obviously has already been submitted. So let's validate it and see what it says. Yeah, so you can see this has been submitted already, but what will happen if it hasn't is Apple sucks all the information from the feed, and then you'll be able to just hit submit. It takes about 2 to 5 business days to do that. So yeah, it's relatively simple, but you do need an Apple ID in order to get into Apple. So you take the feed and then you submit to Apple.
Awesome. Thank you. If you were to create weekly episodes, how many codes would you recommend from AppSumo?
Yeah, so maybe we'll go to the page. So if you were to just have one podcast, you'd probably be fine with just one code. Unless you, you'd be fine with one code to start with. The only challenge you may have in the future is if you get too many listeners. If you get over 50,000 downloads, which is about 1 terabit of bandwidth per month, then you're going to be really happy to pay the extra $10 for the add-on to get another terabyte.
You can.
Yeah, for sure. And so if you know you're going to do one podcast and you're starting out, then one code is definitely enough.
Cool. Very fun. Can the subscription address be our own email address?
Great question. So the answer is yes, but you'll need to do an extra step. So you can see here, this is a subscription address. All you need to do is create the email address that you want. I say we got all the leads here. So everyone's been sending through there, sending to that email. That's cool. So you won't have actually get an email with the handbook because, as I mentioned, we haven't actually integrated this email list, which is bad. As an example, I should have integrated this. But if we were integrated into Email Octopus or into Zapier, then you would get an email in a couple of minutes delivering the handbook. But because it's a manual process with this customer, we every day go in, download the leads and upload them. So that's a bit annoying that I can't actually show that in action. Maybe what I'll quickly do is jump into my account and I'll give you another email address to email so you can actually see it working. But sorry, the question is, so you create the email list. Okay, but before I answer that question, I just want to quickly show you guys something. So this is the email list I use on my podcast. It's podcast@bcast.email. So when you send an email to this, you'll see that we've integrated here with Email Octopus, and it's going to go into my email list, and then you'll get an email from me talking about SaaS marketing. And we actually have also integrated this with Zapier as well, but I don't think you'll get 2. I think you'll just get 1. So if you do want to test it out just to prove that it works, so it's podcast@bcast.email. And then you can unsubscribe straight away, or you can stay on my email list if you want to learn about SaaS marketing. But to answer your question, to have your own email address, all you need to do is create podcast at your domain. So it's basically an email address on your domain, podcast@saasmarketer.io would be mine. And then you forward all emails from that address to this one, which is relatively easy to do in Gmail or your email provider. So I think we just got a couple new leads there. So we can actually see, we'll go into my email account. So ignore all this data. So we'll see here. Yeah, so Daniel has just been subscribed to my list, as has Jürgen, as has AJ. So you can see here that it does actually work. And I think an email is sent to congratulate you for joining my email list. But yes, the answer is yes, you can, but you need to forward the emails.
Great, thank you. This also email related, although I guess different. Will you enable custom email addresses for auto opt-in?
Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of same, kind of different. You can create, when you create an email list, you customize, you choose. So you can't choose podcast because I already took that, but you can choose Tom. Tom's probably free. So yeah, you can choose that. Then also, if you want to have your own domain, you can create that and then forward onto this domain. So yes, is the answer.
Amazing. A lot of auto opt-in questions. Okay, can you have more than one opt-in?
Yeah, you can actually create as many email lists as you like for different calls to action. You can only have one on your player. So remember I was saying, so in your account, you could create an email list for each podcast. And here's actually quite a good example because I'm showing you an account with multiple podcasts. So you can see with this podcast, which is the main one, you'll see that I have connected that email list to the podcast. So if you go to the player, let me show you the player for this podcast. You'll see that the call to action on the player is the same one, don't miss an episode. And if you submit that, you'll go through into email octopus as well. But yeah, you can basically create as many as you like if you have different calls to action. So you might have a call to action for a webinar, call to action for an ebook. So yeah, you can create as many as you want.
All right. I currently have over 300 episodes hosted elsewhere and am listed on Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. If I switch over to bCast, will I lose any current episodes and or listing juice with all of these channels?
Great. Yeah, it's a really good question. We've had this quite a lot. The answer is no. And because the process is you go to import podcast, you'd find your podcast here. You click import. And what that would do, it would create a mirror feed in bCast with all 300 episodes. It takes like less than 5 minutes to do that. And so then you have the mirror feed. You just check to make sure everything's there. And then literally all you do is you then take that new feed, which would be here. So you take that feed and then you go to where you're listed in Apple, and you would go to your show. So here you can see these are different shows. And so you go here, let's say you were listed on Libsyn. The feed would be like probably feeds.libsyn, whatever. And you go here, you click paste. I'm not going to do that. And then you click refresh, and then you'd resubmit. And all that does is instead of pointing at the Libsyn feed, it points at our feed. You don't lose, well, I'm 99% sure you don't lose any reviews, but obviously that's Apple. Like no one's ever lost a review that has done this with us, but I can't guarantee that because I'm not Apple. But you won't lose, basically, because Apple is just pulling from the feed. It doesn't, it keeps the reviews regardless of what feed it's pulling from. So you won't lose any juice, and you can copy over in a few minutes, check everything's fine, and then you go and then replace this in all the directories.
Amazing. All right. Can you talk about GDPR/CCPA?
Very, very good question. We, I guess to be brutally honest, we haven't thought about this very much. I think when you're taking people's data, the only data you're taking from someone would be in the email list. And I think the rules are for GDPR is that if you are taking someone's email address, you have to show some kind of, you have to tell them what they're going to do with it, and you have to show some kind of privacy details. So that's we push that onto our podcast host to manage that. All the data kept within bCast on our domain is obviously covered by that. We have the necessary security, clearances, etc. So you won't, bCast is not going to get you in any trouble for that. I guess what you do with people's email addresses is kind of up to you, but we don't take we can't be accountable for what our customers are doing with the email addresses they collected through bCast, but you won't get any trouble with bCast for it because we're cleared on that. I hope that answers the question.
Cool. Yeah. Is the intro limited to 24 seconds?
No. So you can add as many as long as you want. Let me just show you examples. So this one, I created one that's 57. So it can actually be as long as you want for the insert.
Awesome. Can you discuss branding? Can I brand everything, player, etc., with my brand instead of bCast?
Yeah, right. So right now, the only thing you can do on the player is the color here. So you can see that's red, and you'll see, not on that. So yeah, or purple. The two places where the bCast brand is showing is here and on the podcast site. Right now, that can't be removed with any, even our highest subscription customers on the enterprise plan, which is like $75 a month, can't remove the branding. The way we kind of help with that in the short term is by allowing you to put your affiliate link there. So you can see here, I've actually added that to my player. So you can see that's my affiliate link. There may be a time in the future where we allow to remove the branding from the player and from the site. But right now, it's not possible.
Great. Can we customize the guest alert email? Are there plans for an unbranded player or max codes? That's it.
That's a good question about the guest email. That's a good point about. So what we're talking about here is the email that we send to guests. Can we? Because right now it has the bCast brand on it, which is a very good point. Right now we can't rebrand that, but as and when we bring in remove branding, then we would probably allow that as well. And I totally get why you want that. In terms of max codes, yeah, I think we're basically in talks about removing branding. I'm not going to promise anything, but there may be something that we announce before the end of the deal. But and if you buy the deal now, you're definitely going to get that. If we do it after the deal at some point in the future, you'll get that as well. So if we do it at any point, it's going to be available to Sumolings. Right now, it isn't, and I can't promise anything, but it may happen. Is the answer.
Can't promise anything, but it may happen. I love it.
Yeah.
A question for you then about what is coming up. Just can you tell us what you're excited about that bCast has on the roadmap? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have a public roadmap here. Maybe I'll put that in the chat, so you can see everything that has been built in the past month. So you can see what we, and also in June as well. What I'm really excited about is actually we're going to be surveying all the Sumolings that have jumped into the deal at the end of the promotion. And then we're going to try and get a really good idea of what features Sumolings think are going to help make them more profitable. We have already obviously spoken to a lot of Sumolings since we started. We've added these ideas into here. I think what is going to be a big focus for us is how can we take, you're doing all this hard work to produce this audio content. How can we enable you to push that out quicker and easier to more platforms where it's going to bring more people back to you, more downloads, more email addresses, right? So for example here, how can we enable you to quickly export the whole audio with some nice images to YouTube, right? That would then link back to the podcast, or of course, if you have an audio CTA in the YouTube video, you're going to get more people listening to that. You're going to get more email addresses, right? So that's an example. Another one is these audio form videos that you see. How can we enable customers to very easily create those videos, auto share them through to LinkedIn in order to get more exposure for the podcast? So that's the stuff that excites me the most, is how can we enable you guys to get more awareness for your podcast, and therefore ultimately more downloads, more email addresses, and more profit. Or how can you make the podcast more profitable? That's what excites us.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. About the deal, in the pricing plans, I see how many downloads are included in each plan, but I'm not clear on how many uploaded hours of recordings are included.
This is because it's unlimited.
Cool. I thought that might be the answer. All right. I have clients with lots of podcasts. Is the tool open to commercial licensing?
So the way we're doing that with the deal right now is that obviously you can buy 10 codes give you 29 podcasts, right? Which is 29 terabits, which is 29 times 50 downloads per month. And so when you have multiple podcasts, you can create something called a master and a sub account. I actually don't have that in these accounts, and I should probably try that out. Maybe I'll try and find one. What that basically allows you to do is give access to clients just to their specific podcast. Let's say you have a marketing agency and you want to help your clients run podcasts. You could sell them bCast, and then you could give them access to just their podcast. You could control that. You could control how many podcasts they have, and you can also impersonate them and go into their account. You can actually also brand that account with your branding. That wouldn't take the bCast branding off the player and the site. So that is what a number of Simulings that have jumped in are doing. I just want to quickly see if I have one of these accounts. I think it might be here. We changed the password. So I can't actually show you that functionality right now unless I'll turn off screen sharing, and I'll try and quickly get that password for you, because I know we changed it. Give me 2 seconds. Or where can I find that? But the answer is yes. If you're looking to run podcasts for clients, then you can use the master and sub account features when you have more than one AppSumo code.
Awesome. Can you talk a bit about your infrastructure? Are you hosted on Amazon servers? Yeah.
So we're hosted on AWS. The code stack, I'm not the person to talk about this, but we're built in PHP. I'm not sure what database software we use, but we use AWS, so we can scale as much as needed by our customers.
Awesome. We had another question about just a clarification. When you do add ads, can you add them to any episode, no matter how far, like how long ago it was?
Yep, any episode.
Also, when this is at the beginning or end, is there a marker? Like not the first thing being an ad, but after the intro or whatever.
Sorry, just repeat that question, Lindsay. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a follow-up on the ads. When this is at the beginning or end, is there a marker? Like, is the ad the first thing, or does it come after the intro or whatever?
Yeah, so right, it's a great question. So right now, you can just do the start and the end. You can't insert it anywhere. It has been a requested feature. Like, can you say, I want to insert the ad at 35 seconds? That's something that we are working on and we believe we will release. But right now, it's just start or the end.
All right. Another clarification on the deal. For the double AppSumo codes is the 3, did you say these are terabytes? I don't know. Is the bandwidth per podcast, or can it apply to just one podcast?
It can apply. So we started off the deal with it just applying to each podcast, but then after a couple of days, we changed that to it being on any podcast. So you could buy 3 codes and have all the bandwidth just on a single podcast.
Awesome. All right, Sumolings, this is your time to send in any of your last questions that you would like.
And I think I just got the password, so I can show you the master sub account thing.
Cool, yeah, go for it.
Seconds to find that. I just have to check that it works. But yeah, hit me with any other questions that people have.
No problem. Can you create a network with bCast?
So, okay, yeah, we're in, great. So I guess you could, like, we don't have any network functionality, but you could run all of the podcasts of a network within bCast, right? So you just buy multiple codes, have them all in one account or in sub accounts. So quickly, let me show you the kind of sub account. This is an AppSumo account you can see here, and you can see here the AppSumo accounts have this sub account feature. And so this person has a sub account. It doesn't actually have any podcasts assigned to it. But Steve has a master account. He's given Tyrone a sub account. You can click on settings. You can set the email address, password, and change the branding. So if I uploaded an image here, you would change the bCast logo in the sub account. And you can also add a color, which would change. Let me see if we can do it now. So we're going to do a nice green color. So that's on the sub account. So we're saving that. And then the master can jump in and impersonate the sub. As you can see here, that green color's here, and they can add in their own logo. So this is essentially, Steve has an agency and he's given his client, Tyrone, access to bCast, but it has Steve's brand color. And if Steve had a logo to upload, that logo would be seen there. Steve can also control how many podcasts are in that sub account. So this is how you can use bCast to essentially resell to your clients if you would like to.
Awesome, thank you. A clarification, are you saying that bCast is an email list provider like MailChimp aside from hosting podcasts?
No, we just give you an easy way to collect email addresses. We don't allow you to do anything with the email addresses apart from download them or send them through into your provider.
All right. Are there any audio optimization capabilities?
Right now, no. So we kind of leave it to you right now to get the audio into bCast. We are not automatically editing. We're not automatically making it sound better. That may be something we look at in the future. We prioritize that over other features. But right now, you just upload, and then we're kind of helping you with, well, once you have the audio, what happens after that, how you make that profitable. So we haven't ventured into that area yet, but we may do in the future.
We have tools for that, Sumolings. You all will be fine. Is there an easy way to integrate ads from an ad network rather than adding custom ads one by one?
So there isn't, but you wouldn't. Yeah, I guess you could add. You'd have to add custom ads, but you could add them to all your episodes in a couple of clicks. So you get the ad, and let's say you have a podcast with 170 episodes. You just upload the ad, and then you would add them all into those 170 episodes. If you wanted to do a different ad every month, over a year, yes, you would need 12 ads, and then every month you would switch them out and add the new one. But yeah, we're not automatically connected with any ad networks yet.
Amazing. All right. Those are most of our questions. I'm looking into a couple. If somebody has 3 podcasts, do they need multiple AppSumo codes? It sounds like that's based on how much it's listened to.
So if somebody would like to have 3 podcasts in bCast, they would need 2 codes.
Okay. 2 codes. All right. Thank you. It seems like people are getting clear. All right. Wonderful. That's all we have time for today. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, Tom, for taking the time to answer all of those questions. Thank you, Sumolings, for sending in your questions. Of course, if you have any more, you can go ahead and leave those on the deal page. And we would love to hear from those of you. I've been seeing some chats coming in saying people set up their podcasts yesterday and it was super easy. So if you have any other comments that you want to leave for us about your experience with bCast, of course, you could do that too. All of this is available on appsumo.com/bcast. You can start redeeming your codes. It starts for a lifetime deal starting at just $79. And of course, it is backed by AppSumo's 60-day guarantee. So go ahead, get set up. Let us know how it's working for you. If you have any more questions, leave those on the deal page. Thank you so much, Tom. And thank you, Sumolings. Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. And thank you, Lindsay, for hosting.
Absolutely. Have a good one.